Joining us now is Andrea Lucas. She is the acting chair of the EEOC. Andrea, thanks so much for joining us, or chair, I should call you. What did Jewish employees experience on campus that led to these investigations and ultimately the settlement?
Thanks so much for having me, Jake. It's a pleasure to be here to tout this historic settlement. We saw on Columbia similar things across the nation in many universities. Jewish employees being barred from their campus workplaces, assaults, crimes, hate speech, instigations of violence, violent threats. Really troubling things that should never have happened in the 2020s in America.
So your part of the $221 million is the $21 million.
Yes.
That goes to Jewish employees of Columbia?
Correct. It goes directly to employees of Columbia. It's not a fine like the other component.
The other part is $200 million, is Columbia paying a fine. That's
right.
And that's for what?
It's a civil rights fine, and it's really historic to be able to have that. It represents the gravity of the issues here. But our portion, our jurisdiction is really powerful because it's remedial. So it's able to take money from the employer and directly to victims of anti-Semitism.
So the EEOC statement says you'll send out information about a confidential questionnaire to all Columbia employees, including students employed by the university, to determine who is eligible to receive any of this money. How will you decide who is and is not eligible?
It's a really broad, the investigation which came out of a commissioner's charge that I instigated actually in the last administration, but that administration failed to follow up on it. It's really quite broad. It's any Jewish employee who's experienced anti-Semitism. So we'll be looking, and it'll be fact-dependent depending on what the individual experienced. But again, it's very expansive. Columbia has 37,000 employees. We estimate that there'll be hundreds of potential claimants given the size of its Jewish population.
So what kind of offenses are we talking about? Like when protesters stormed one of the administration buildings and kept that, is that a violation of the civil rights of people who wanted to go into that building? Like, can you give some more specifics?
Yeah, so Title VII prohibits hostile work environments. So if harassment has risen to a hostile work environment, just like you might have a hostile educational environment, that can change the terms and conditions of your employment, basically. So if you're barred, for example, from your workplace, if people are recovering for both emotional distress that they've experienced in the wake of anti-Semitic harassment, as well as back pay if they were forced out of their jobs. So we've seen situations where people have felt forced to resign, take medical leave, take sabbaticals because they feel so unsafe on campus that they can't perform their jobs.
So you said they feel so unsafe on campus. So let me ask you about that. So does the presence of protesters, student protesters, who object to the war in Gaza and Israel's war against Hamas, is that in itself a hostile work environment?
I think it just, hostile work environments are always fact dependent. So I don't want to give you a specific answer about that. I think the concern for Columbia is less about protests itself, but rather that you have an employer violating neutral time, place, and manner restrictions, right? That's a really long-standing First Amendment jurisprudence. You might have a right to protest, but you don't have a right to break the law, to assault someone, to engage in crimes on campus, to bar someone from accesses to their terms and conditions of privileged employment, like being actually physically able to get into your workspace, right? We've got professors and employees who can't access campus because the protests are at such a furor that they feel scared to go on campus. We've got a rabbi saying, don't come to campus. It's not safe for you here. Mm-hmm. Those students, many of them are work-study students at Columbia. They're employees too.
I remember that rabbi. He was an Orthodox rabbi. We actually broke the news of that letter he sent out.
Yes.
He was warning people, don't come to campus. You're not safe here.
Right.
So people who received that email or who felt unsafe because there were individual moments where people were assaulted or whatever, whether or not it was widespread, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But that feeling of unsafeness, that in itself is discrimination by the university?
That could contribute to a hostile work environment. They could be eligible to recover.
So how do you draw the line between the students that are allowed to protest a war that they see as unjust versus people feeling uncomfortable? Because obviously, discomfort is part of life. It's part of education, for sure. And where I don't know how you draw the line between discomfort and not feeling safe.
Yeah. So, harassment jurisprudence is pretty straightforward. It's severe or pervasive. So, If you've got an employer that's refusing to enforce its policies, it's failing to allow people to complain, it's deterring people from being able to push back against that harassment, it's allowing crimes on campus, it's allowing people to have extremely disruptive protests, right? You don't have an absolute right to say whatever you want whenever you want it. You have to follow policies like you're not going to be able to protest inside of a campus building. You're not going to be able to protest during someone's work period of time or in their classroom, right? Campuses, they could have done this better. They knew how to handle this. There's a lot of hand-wringing about this, but it's actually not very complicated.
Well, let me ask you a question. So the chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Some people say that's just a chant for liberation and freedom. Other people interpret that as wipe Israel off the face of the earth and kill all the Jews in Israel. Is there any room for the first interpretation of this when it comes to making a decision about whether or not the protests are creating a hostile work environment or an unsafe work environment?
Again, it's going to be fact dependent of what someone experienced. And the main thing here is we're not investigating this anymore. We've settled, right? We've resolved it. They've agreed that they had a problem. I think that's clear. They didn't admit liability, but you've got Claire Shipman, you've got others, the former president admitting that they had a hostile work environment on campus. That's a direct quote from the former president of Columbia.
Is this just the first to come? I mean, are there other? I mean, there are other campuses where we, as viewers, have seen scenes that probably make a lot of people feel uncomfortable. Is this just the first of many settlements?
Well, I'm not tired of winning yet, I'll say that. I don't think anyone in the administration is tired of combating anti-Semitism aggressively, unlike the prior administration. The EEOC is bound by really tight confidentiality provisions. The cabinet agencies can talk about their investigations. We are silent up until the point at which we make a resolution or we file a lawsuit. So I think the takeaway for your viewers is that just because the EEOC has been quiet doesn't mean that we haven't been working hard. But I can't say more than that because we have to keep what we're specifically working on confidential until we land the deal.
Last question, which is just, are you worried at all about infringing on the free speech rights of students? Again, I'm not talking about direct threats, physical assaults, blocking people from entering a place, but if people are passionate about ending a war, where do you draw the line so people know that they can have free speech rights? I know the conservative movement talks a lot about free speech rights and oppression of that by the left in their view. How do you make sure that this isn't oppression of free speech rights by the right?
That's something I cared about and thought a lot about when filing a commissioner's charge, but I think that the key is you just stay on the bright lines of harassment jurisprudence, right? You can have free speech, but you don't have free speech to say it whenever you want, however you want. You don't have a free speech right to break the law or to violate long-standing civil rights laws. And when that happens, you get what happened here, a 60-year historic settlement for anti-Semitism.
No, it's big. It's why you're here. The acting chair of the EEOC, Andrea Lucas, thanks for being here, taking our questions. We really